Two. Okay, looks like we are at least live on one platform, so I'm gonna pull up the PowerPoint and get going, and should be good to go everywhere soon. So thank you everyone that's starting to tune in or that's watching this later. Today is the last day of SASA's Halloween Bash. We're closing it out with Archaeogaming live conversations about myths and the MCU, so the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've got a lot of experts in this panel. They're introduce themselves after I go through this quick PowerPoint. And as always, we have our SASA gamers, Kate and Alex, that are going to be running this. So what is SASA? If this is your first SASA event, SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. We work to reverse the current downward trend in the studies of the ancient world by engaging the public and bringing together students and scholars to share their passion for studies of the ancient world in order to inspire the next generation of students. And one of the ways that we do this is with events like this, especially like this, where we get to, connect the past and pop culture. Is always really fun and interesting. Where to find SASA? You've surely found us on some of these platforms if you're watching this, but we're on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. We have a newer TikTok, and we're also on LinkedIn. We're basically Save Ancient Studies or Ancient Save, on all of those. Should pop up if you put in SASA or Save Ancient Studies. Just a little live events protocol. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. I've got a chat aggregator going, so I should be able to see all those questions and send them into our panelists. So please send them whenever they pop into your brain. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. Fingers crossed this is streaming well and there's no worries. We've done a lot of events like this, but sometimes you just never know. You all know how Zoom and stuff is. So our live events are live streamed on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. And after the events ends, the recordings will be archived and put up there. So if you missed part of it or you want to share it with a friend or whatever, you can find those recordings on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. And I keep forgetting to turn on closed captioning. I will make sure to do that after this PowerPoint. They are generated through Zoom, so sorry about any ancient names they get wrong. Most importantly, have fun. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this is part of our Halloween Bash. And the goal of the Halloween Bash is to try and grow our SASA community of monthly supporters, which you can join for as little as $3 a month. By becoming a monthly supporter, you get perks such as seeing our SASA brochure, and that brochure is specifically for supporters. And you also get quarterly update on the progress we're making with your support. Other ways to support SASA, you can also subscribe on Twitch. That's $5 a month, or if you have Amazon Prime, you can get a free Twitch subscription through that. So why not spend it on us? You can also add SASA as your preferred charity for Amazon Smile. We get a portion of any Amazon products you buy that qualify for that. And you can find the links for all of that by going to saveancientstudies.org/HalloweenBatch. I'll put the link to that in the chat very soon. We really appreciate any amount that you can give. And if you can't give at this time, we really appreciate you just, sharing all our links and watching all our events and all that good stuff. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. I'll hand it over to our SASA gamers.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're not doing Archaeogaming this week. I don't know if there's a term like Archaeocinema or something like that, but if there is, then that's what we're doing. So we are here with 4 amazing guests who will be talking with us about the myth and the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think we should start with an introduction of our guests today. So I'll briefly ask each of you to briefly present yourself. I see Maciej is first up on the screen, so maybe let's start with him and then we can go down the line. So Maciej, Who are you?
Thank you so much, Alex. Hi everyone, I'm Maciej, and well, I have background in classics and ancient history, and I've always been fascinated by Greek gods, their powers, their weaknesses, how they function, how they work, and this is something that has been driving me for these past several years. And I keep trying to answer these questions, and recently I've been going into the classical reception because I deeply believe that by looking at how we imagine them today, we might actually get a glimpse or maybe understand in a better way how the ancient Greeks understood them. But this is not limited to just the gods of ancient Greece. I'm just interested in the supernatural creatures in any manner. And I have to say, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm happy I've been invited and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Maciej. I think Joel is next.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Joel. I'm from New Zealand, way down under. I am a PhD graduate of the University of Otago. I kind of have two areas of specialty. One is sort of eschatology, so what happens when you die from ancient Greek and Roman perspectives, but also reception studies. And I do lots on superheroes, gods, video games, cinema, all that sort of stuff. If there's a fandom, I sort of attach myself to that. So lots of interest. I'm really excited to be part of this today. So thanks for the invite, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Briana, I see you're next.
Hello, I'm Briana Jackson. I have a PhD in Egyptian art and archaeology from New York University, and I specialize in the Amarna period. Happy birthday, King Tut's tomb discovery. He's from the Amarna period. And also international relations between Egypt and the Near East, or I guess Western Asia, we should be saying. In the Bronze Age, take that, Kate. I also do Archaeogaming things, and my specialization in Archaeogaming is city builders. I love them. They're the best. And I love you, Loki. I'm wearing a shirt for Loki.
Great. And then finally, David.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Thank you both, Alex and Kate, for the invitation. I am David S. Anderson. I'm an associate professor at Radford University in Virginia in the United States. I got my PhD in anthropology from Tulane University, primarily focusing on the archaeology of the Maya. So I have a lot of background in Maya, Mesoamerica stuff. So kind of opposite side of the globe for a lot of folks in the room today. I also do a lot of scholarship on pseudoarchaeology, and I think of this more broadly as public perception of archaeology in the ancient world. That is, what people think, like they watch these movies and what they walk away from them thinking about the ancient world. And pseudoarchaeology just happens to take up a whole huge chunk of that whole public perception of archaeology thing. And so I am here to, I think, talk about ancient aliens and Eternals, maybe.
And then some.
All right. Thank you all for introducing yourself. Thank you everyone for being here. Before we go to the actual roundtable, let's just do like a very brief speed run of the MCU. Let's do a very 5-minute rundown just to remind everyone of how big the MCU is, which kind of mythological stories they have already told, which types of mythology they have featured. I hope everyone can see the screen right now. So I'm just going to go very quickly through the MCU from the beginning to the end in terms of its mythology. So I won't be I won't talk about any movies that don't feature a mythology explicitly. So I think the first mythology we actually saw was Thor in Marvel's Phase 1 in 2011. The very opening shot of the film is set in a town called Tonsberg, remember that name, Norway, at around the middle of the 10th century CE. And this is where the frost giants attack, and where Odin and the Asgardians fight. And this is sort of like the first introduction of these people and of the audience to mythology. And afterwards we are transported to Asgard, which is a main setting for a lot of the movie. And of course, the movie revolves on the character Thor and his growth as a person. Like he fights the frost giants, but he learns how to be less proud, less aggressive. And then in the next film, I mean the next film that we could talk about is a brief scene from the Avengers in 2012 where Thor starts to interact with the superheroes of Earth, and this is like the first time that we actually like see this connection between gods and superheroes, which will pop up sometimes in the MCU later as well. Black Widow says to Captain America, "These guys come from legends; they're basically gods." Whereupon Cap replies, "There's only one god, ma'am, not man," and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that. So it's like it's this refutation of gods that we find here as well. And then for the main next part, it's about Thor in mythology. Like there's a second film, Thor: The Dark World in 2013, which revolves around Thor. It doesn't do that many different things about mythology. I think it brings us to a couple of new locations. But that's, I mean, I don't think there's any real changes in the way mythology is represented here. That in the next Avengers film, Thor has this vision of destruction of his world. Heimdall is dead. He doesn't quite know what to make of it. He goes to the cave of the Norns, like the Nornir in mythology, to sort of try to gain an understanding of that. But then all becomes clear in the next film, which is Thor Ragnarok, which is its own like quite liberal retelling of the Ragnarok myth, if that's not too generous. We open with Surtur, the fire giant, and we also find Hela, not Hel like in mythology, where I think she's called Hel, but here she's called Hela, played by Cate Blanchett. We are also introduced to the Valkyries, or at least one Valkyrie, the only remaining one, who I think for the remainder of the MCU is still called Valkyrie. I don't think she has her own name. And then finally, Asgard is destroyed by Surtur, kind of like in the ancient myth, but also in more ways kind of not. And after that, the Asgardians, they are banished. I mean, banished. They don't have a home anymore because Asgard's a place, not a people. Sorry, Asgard's people, not a place. The Asgardians, or at least the remaining Asgardians, are forced to roam the galaxy, and this is where we'll next find them as well. But before we find them again, there's a brief mention of mythology in Black Panther as well. Like in the very opening, there's the goddess Bast, who is shown very briefly. And then Black Panther himself also travels to the ancestral plane, a representation of the afterlife, which I think was the first type of afterlife that we saw, but not the last. We then, in Avengers Infinity War, find the Asgardians again, but this time they're attacked by Thanos, who is, as I don't have to tell you, not attested in Norse mythology, but he sort of kills the remaining Asgardians. He kills Heimdall, he kills Loki, and sort of you could actually say that part of the real Ragnarok in the MCU is not in Thor Ragnarok, it's actually in Avengers Infinity War. But interestingly, before Loki dies, his last words are to Thanos, "You will never be a god," which is something that I think we will be able to talk about. Instead, Thanos is called the Mad Titan, and I think that nomenclature, Titan versus you will never be a god, is revealing, and we might sort of see the MCU maybe as a sort of Titanomachy in that respect. Then after a while, I mean, I don't think we see in mythology that much afterwards. Oh, Thor goes to Nidavellir and he meets the dwarf Eitri, who are attested names in Norse mythology. But then in Avengers Endgame, 5 years later, the remaining Asgardians have found a new home called New Asgard, which is the town Tonsberg, where it all started in Thor 1. And it's a quite quaint little town. At the end of the film, something interesting happens with Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, which is picked up by Captain America, which sort of, I think, leads the way into sort of dilution of divine identity. Like the hammer is not just intrinsic or inherent to Thor, but it might be picked up by other characters. Vision already picked it up a couple of years earlier, so I think this is more like the sort of tension between the superhero versus the god identity, which I think we can talk a little bit about. And then going into phase 4, that's where we'll find the most mythology in the MCU. It starts with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, where we travel to a Chinese mystical dimension called Ta Lo, which is not, I think, is explicitly attested in myths, but is supposed to represent a Chinese mythical world. We find creatures from ancient China. For example, Morris is an actual attested Chinese mythological creature, and he's also incredibly cute. Then I think this one will be one that we'll talk about a lot. The Eternals in 2021, which is a group of superpowered eternal beings from a planet called Olympia. And they are all kind of named after gods. Like there's Makari, and she's very fast. That's kind of like Mercury. Or there's Icarus, who is named after Icarus, and he can fly. Athena has association with Athena, but these are not the actual gods. They're just associated with them. But they come to Earth in 5000 BCE, and they help fight the enemies of the humans, and they then give powerful they then give artifacts or technological advancements like the plow, for example, when they're in Babylon. And I think this shows a lot of similarities to this ancient aliens conceptualization of mythology, which we'll obviously talk about. And what's also interesting that the very first shot of Eternals is this sort of Star Wars like text scroll that starts with "in the beginning ... ... which sort of resembles like this cosmogonical text, or even maybe the beginning of Genesis in the Bible. So it sort of frames its story as a myth or as a almost type of religious context, maybe. Then we had the TV show Moon Knight on Disney Plus, which is the first TV show in this list, where we have Moon Knight, who is an avatar of the Egyptian god Khonshu, the lunar deity, and their mission is to fight the villainized Amit, who I know at least one person here has very strong thoughts about. We also encounter the goddess Taweret, the kind-hearted hippo in this show, and we also travel to the Duat, another afterlife. And I think Moon Knight is very isolated from the rest of the MCU, but the only reference that we have to the rest of the MCU is a reference to the ancestral plane in Black Panther, which we saw earlier. That's interesting as well. Then there was a brief reference in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness to a first demon called Chthon, which is a Greek word, which I think is also interesting. And when Doctor Strange encounters a variant of his, that variant says he's a sorcerer with the power of gods. Again, there's this tie between gods and superheroes. Miss Marvel also had a brief reference to Islamic mythology or folklore, like she fights the jinn, and she's actually a jinn herself, or at least part jinn. Then Love and Thunder is, I guess, another one of those big case studies that we'll talk about, where the villain Gore starts killing gods because he's disillusioned with them once he realizes the gods, they care about nothing except for themselves. So we have this concept of deicide, which some of our panelists have written about, so that's going to be interesting to talk about as well. Thor then travels to Omnipotent City, which is adorned with these classical sculptures. He encounters Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, in what is supposed to be a Greek accent, which does not necessarily resemble an actual Greek accent. The characters next to Zeus here are called, I think, Zeusettes, which, yeah, is something. We encounter a lot of different characters, mythological characters. For example, the one on the right, in the right, the right corner down below is Bast again. To the left, we have a more Mesoamerican looking deity. There's a serpent god as well. I think popular journalism has identified this god as Kukulkan, which I'm not sure it is, but it might be a possibility. There's an Egyptian deity here as well, but they also invent their own new gods. For example, this is one of the in-universe Marvel gods. I think this one is the Nini of the Noni of the of Korg's race. Interestingly, he is a rock and he's sitting on a throne of scissors, so rock beats scissors. I think this is one of Taika's most unsubtle jokes. With Dionysus is there as well, who is instantly recognizable, and he is the one who is actually, I think, most identifiable of all these other gods. But what's also interesting of Love and Thunder is that Korg tells the stories of these gods as myths. Like you can see here, he's telling these stories to other characters in the universe, but the myths he tells are, of course, the stories in the MCU itself. Like it's the fight against Thanos, for example, or how Thor, I think he says, went from dad bod to god bod. Again. And then at the end credit scene, there was it's our first glimpse of Hercules, who is sent by Zeus to hunt Thor down, which I think means that we're going to get Thor 5 and at least another crossover of mythological cultures.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah. And then next week, actually, looking to the future, there's going to be Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, where the villain Namor has turned into a Mesoamerican deity. Like he's now living, or he is the king of Talocan, I think it's called, which is Tlalocan in mythology, named after the god Tlaloc. But Namor himself is not called Tlaloc. They apparently call him Kukulkan, the feather serpent god. Which I think means that we're going to see more mythology, and let's hope they do it in a different way than Eternals and Love and Thunder. And so what we can see in this overview slide is that they have sort of doubled down on mythology quite literally in Phase 4. Like as the MCU expanded, they went into different mythological directions, and I think this gives us a lot to talk about. And I think this is now time, after this brief rundown of 13 years of storytelling, to go into the actual discussion. But this was a very brief refresher.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. We worked really hard, and by we, I mean Alex mostly worked really hard on that PowerPoint, and then I added more stuff right in the nick of time. So I think we can, oh boys, there's a lot to talk about. And by looking at that picture of Russell Crowe again, I know exactly from which statue they took inspiration for his locks. I'm terrified and laughing at the same time. So I'm gonna start, let's start big with the first question for the panel. Anyone who wants can take it. You can interrupt each other. You can fight if you want. We're good with that. It gives us content. Let us start with like something very general. What are your thoughts on how the various ancient cultures are represented individually? How gracefully or marvelously or not marvelously do you feel the blending of ancient and modern elements is executed? And also, which elements do you wish were included but were not? And which stuff you saw and went, what is this? What in the name of whatever gods is this? And we'll start from here. So whoever wants to start, please go ahead. The stage is yours.
I'll go first then. I think just picking up that last point, I had a really fun conversation with a friend just after Love and Thunder came out. And we were talking about the post-credit scene where Hercules appears, and he was convinced it wasn't actually Hercules because the accent was so bad. And he was trying to figure out who this character was, and I had to confess that I actually put the subtitles on and went back and rewatched it just to confirm my suspicions was that they were trying to say Hercules. And as we all know, of course, that's who it is. So, I mean, that for me is one of the sort of things I wish they would have got that. It's almost completely over the top, that Greek accent, and it makes it so comical. And I mean, Zeus is just a comical figure in that whole movie, which I've seen some really interesting discussion online as to some people go, well, I mean, Zeus is a bit of a dick and he is all about the orgies in mythology, and so it's a really good representation. And then other people going, yeah, but it takes it a bit too far. And I think if we take that as our sort of end point for where we end up with the Greek mythology, it's interesting to see how that's developed over time in their MCU. I mean, fantastic PowerPoint there, Alex. Thank you for that. And sort of we start off very tentatively sort of embracing mythology in the MCU, and then we sort of see it become more normalized, and then now it's at the point where Love and Thunder is almost taking the mickey out of it, like that rock beats scissors. Yeah, I mean, that's so subtle, like you pointed out. And one of the things that sticks out to me, though, is it's largely the traditional, what we might say, Western mythology that we're seeing that with, because the counter is Islamic mythology with the jinn, and the Egyptian stuff with Moon Knight is being handled very carefully, and I think that's that in itself is great. I think we do need to make sure we honor the native people who that belongs to, and I wonder if some of that is to do with the tradition of that contrast is to do with the tradition of Greek myth. You think peplum in film and that sort of tradition, and how that sort of just took the mickey out of Hercules for decades. And so it's not that we're being disrespectful to Western culture, it's that we're building on that longer cinematic tradition, whereas now, because we have a lot more sensibilities about being respectful to other cultures, when we're introducing into Western cinema these other mythologies from other cultures, we are doing them justice, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, I think that's an interesting trajectory I sort of reflect on sometimes. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that or go in a different direction.
I would like to say something briefly. So thank you for making these points. And well, what struck me very strongly is that, well, I think that Marvel Cinematic Universe is somehow buying into this notion that Egyptian mythology is somehow separate and special. And maybe it's going into the same direction for the Mesoamerican mythology and all that, because we see that for they are clearly building their idea, their mythological idea around the Greco-Roman myth as a central focus. You can see this in Love and Thunder, but they also acknowledge as guardians. So they see that the Norse, the Greek, the European, the Western are one, and then we have the other, which is Black Panther / Wakanda / Egyptian / Mesoamerican. So you can sort of see that, yes, they are trying to acknowledge this. And maybe this is why Zeus has this Greek accent, because obviously there was this prevailing tradition to present Greek gods as speaking British accents. So, you know, they are changing this, sort of reflects their origins. But at the same time, this opens a whole another kind of worms, and it goes into colonial attitudes. But I think there is really a divide, at least at this stage of the MCU, between our mythology and the other mythology. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, we're dancing along some interesting lines here where some gods are gods and some gods are just aliens. And that's obviously, there's been a trajectory there. And I was a little bit surprised to see the scene in Love and Thunder, because I haven't tried to do this, but I'm sure you can try to break it down and name each deity that they did represent. And you're going to be able to pretty quickly start talking about who they didn't put in there. And it was a little bit disconcerting for me to just see Zeus like, oh yeah, it's just the Western guy. He's the one in charge. And it's like, oh, it's like, you know, how they're treating different religions is really interesting. And you're kind of hitting that with Wakanda, I think in Shang-Chi. I don't know Chinese religious belief well, but as I understand it, coming forth in Wakanda Forever, as they're going to introduce this character Namor, who is now Namor, who was from Atlantis and is now going to be from this Talokan, which they are. Talokan seems, from what I've been reading so far, of course the movie's not coming out for a week, but it seems like they're treating it like Wakanda, in that it's not a real place, but they're blending in lots of known traditions to kind of create their own fictitious space. And it's a really odd dance of like what is being treated realistically and what is like they're inventing their own version of, and what is a real god and what is just an alien. And there's a big complex web going on here.
And going on what Joel said and what Sage said in the chat, yeah, you're right. There was a stronger attention to accuracy, if we want to put that in quotation marks, on the depiction of ancient Egypt in Moon Knight. Yeah, there was also an attention to not just ancient Egypt, but also modern Egypt. And I think it helps that there was an Egyptian director. They used an Egyptian composer for the music. And yeah, it is a really strange contrast compared to Eternals and Thor: Love and Thunder. You know, there was a bit more, I feel like they were taking it more seriously, where you have, I forget the actor's actual name, and I forget the character's name that he played. The main guy, when he is correcting people about Egyptology even. Which I thought was really interesting, even down to the tiny little hieroglyphics versus hieroglyphs speech. So, I mean, it's such a strong contrast, and it's interesting that was only given TV space, whereas these other ones are all, you know, film, which have a wider audience, I would argue.
Yeah, they still gave us sexy crocodile instead of the full Emmett body. Because we can get weird, but not too weird. I wish they had done that step for obvious Amit-related reasons. But the thing about modern Egypt is great. I think I was on Twitter where like the episode in which they go in Cairo drought, and there were a lot of my Egyptian friends, and I'm sure Briana, your Egyptian friends too, saying finally Cairo is the, you know, chaotic, full of life, colorful, garish megalopolis that it actually is in real life, and not just yellow filter and, you know, people with, you know, towels on their heads, right?
Yeah, they were wearing a very trendy fashion, I noticed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very trendy fashion in Egypt.
And no one is faking an accent.
And curly hair.
And curly hair, finally different hair type, different body types. So even different body types for one of the gods. Finally, which is something that we haven't seen previously in the Marvel universe, right? Everyone was able-bodied, sexy, thin, conventionally attractive, and now we finally have some body diversity. Although one is a hippo, still some body diversity. We don't hippo shame, still some body diversity, right? And then in Eternals, we actually have someone who is deaf, and finally someone who's LGBT openly, although for like 5 seconds. So yeah, I'm gonna sip my tea and keep listening.
I think that's very interesting, the divide between like film and TV, and I think it's also worth pointing out in the credits for Love and Thunder, like when they are listing the gods that they have in the Omnipotent City scene. For example, they list Dionysus, they list Minerva, and then they go over to Maori goddess, Aztec god. So they don't name them. It just like it's in this idea. Okay, we're gonna include this because of diversity reasons, but we're not gonna name them specifically. So it's like, are they actually like characters in the film? They don't say anything. They don't even get a name. Do they fade into the background? Whereas the Greek or Roman mythology is foregrounded. And I think, yeah, they should try to do a better job of that. I think they have done a better job in the series, like you said, like with Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel. They dive deeper in those cultures, but also I think because the series are, for example, I think Ms. Marvel was made by Muslim directors and showrunners, whereas Love and Thunder was not made by someone who probably knew the names of Maori gods. So I think that's a divide there as well in the production context.
If I can pick up on, there's a comment from Majora Z in the chat about the accuracy that seems to be showing up in the visualizations for Namor coming out from Wakanda Forever. And it's, to me, it's interesting because it hits this, like, when are they being accurate and when are they being not? And there's some of the visuals that have come out from Wakanda Forever so far have been deeply based on Mesoamerican material examples. They're drawing from Mesoamerican codices and physical objects and art. Very interestingly, though, there's one scene in one of the trailers where Namor is painting some hieroglyphs, which is really funny because it's clear they're already painted, but he's taking his paintbrush to them. at least according, I cannot read glyphs myself, but David Stewart is one of the foremost experts on Maya hieroglyphs, has publicly commented that it's just gobbledygook on the wall in front of them. They didn't. It's one of those like things you could just. There's like thousands of published text. You could just take one of those and put it in your movie, but for some reason they put
Look at this
gobbledygook.
background. Just slap the texture on that, right? It's easy.
It's so interesting where it's like they are majority of these like right they're taking very real specific references and they're doing their homework sometimes. And so it's like
May I
is the
just
background
build
gonna
on
look really
this?
good, but is the foreground gonna be like just a bunch of mess, or are
Yeah.
they gonna carry that through? And we just don't know.
May I just build on this really quickly, because I think you've made an incredibly important point, David, that we've also mentioned this before, that there is this sort of distance between an actual god and Marvel's idea of a god. And I think this may be at play here as well, that they are trying to show us something that resembles the myth, the culture, but they never say this is the myth, the culture, maybe for the fear that somebody would say, hey, you're misrepresenting it. So maybe there's this factor at play.
And I think it's really interesting. We made that distinction between sort of the Western ones and the other ones that sort of Marvel seems to be doing. So Black Panther and all those sorts of things. And it struck me that these the others seem to also be linked more to spirituality. So they're the ones that have the afterlife, or in the case of Miss Marvel, you know, we see active scenes of Muslim gatherings and those sorts of things. So there's that link of these are actual deities, to distinguish terminology perhaps, who are worshipped and who have followers, sort of in that traditional sense, rather than the more tumultuous mix of god, superhero, like we never see anyone actually worship Thor. We never see anyone really worship Zeus. We get a little bit of confusion in the Eternals as to, you know, are these figures worshipped like gods? Are they sort of just honored like that sort of carry on? And I think that's quite a significant distinction, and builds on that sense of we have some gods that we like to be gods, and we have some gods that we like to be whatever we want to term them.
We have some aliens who are worshipped as gods, but
yeah, aliens who use magic.
Aliens who use magic, or is it magic? And then we have the actual magic users, right? And the retconning of magic in the universe that happened in WandaVision, where at the beginning, when we first see Wanda and Pietro, they've been experimented on, and so their powers are given to them by the Infinity Stones. But then when we get to WandaVision, it's like, oh no, actually the power was inside of you, you know, all along, and you are actually another iteration of a mythical Scarlet Witch. My anthropologist mind went boom when that. I was like, so if she's dressed as a Sokovian fortune teller, means that the Sokovian fortune tellers worship the ancestral Scarlet Witch? What is going on there? But since you all dropped the A bomb, which is Ancient Aliens, let's go there. All right, we got the time. We're ready for this. I got the tea. All right, so. The director of Eternals and the big heads of the MCU have explicitly indicated that Ancient Aliens was an inspiration for Eternals.
I didn't know that.
Plot twist, Briana. Yeah, the Asgardians are also presented as aliens worshipped as deities by the human beings, but the Egyptian gods are actual deities? Question mark? So the question for the panel is, and we're not gonna, I mean, no, we can't talk about Osiris looking like a bureaucrat, because I know Briana has feelings about that. I thought it was brilliant, but she hates that. We have different gripes, as you can see. So the big question is, how do you feel about pseudo-archaeology? Because this is what it is, right? Making its way into one of the biggest franchises to this day. And how do you think scholars who have been dealing with this kind of misinformation can discuss this subject with the general public? So how do we deconstruct the tropes? Do we build a sort of mythology literacy, antiquity literacy? So whoever wants to jump on this, I think all of you will have thoughts. So I will just be here sipping my tea.
I think David should go first on that one.
Mhm. David, please take it away.
Honestly, I think one thing I'd start with, because it's why I jumped at an invitation to join you all today, is I get called a hater a lot if I complain about this, and it's like no, like I'm in my office now, but if I was at home, I'll show you my comic book collection. Like I love Marvel, I love these movies, and I think I don't expect or anticipate perfect accuracy in all of my pop culture. In fact, you probably shouldn't have perfect accuracy for a variety of reasons in pop culture. But there are moments where we really have to question what the influence, what the inspiration was, and whether that's something we want to hold up and elevate. And it's Eternals, it's such a subtle piece of work that it really at least I think for a lot of people, it's a subtle piece of work because they did a lot to strip away the more obviously offensive or problematic elements. And you said even bringing in a diverse cast for the characters and the actors. But ultimately, this is, based on, it's not just the MCU has admitted this, like the original comic book was deliberately, there's a real big backstory here actually, because the original comic book is by Jack Kirby in the 1970s, and it's deliberately an homage to Eric von Däniken, who wrote Chariots of the Gods in 1968, which is sort of, it's not actually the original Ancient Aliens text, not by a long shot, but it's the one that popularized the concept. The really funky thing is that Kirby was writing Ancient Alien stories before Chariots of the Gods was even written. And, I think the one thing missing, I'm sure it's crazy. There was a great PowerPoint that Alex gave us. But the one thing that jumps out to me always that wasn't on there is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they go to Peru in season 1 and find an alien artifact in an ancient Peruvian ruin. That was Jack Kirby's origin story for the Eternals. The Kree are the original ancient alien race for the Marvel universe. And it's like Ancient Aliens has been baked into the MCU well before the Eternals got there. It's just been really super subtle. And I was actually kind of disappointed. I think the biggest thing in some ways that I was disappointed in is that Thanos is an Eternal. That's his origin story in the comic books. And I was I thought he was going to be used as like, oh, we've got to do the Eternals because Thanos, we have to explain Thanos somehow. No, they didn't even bother to try. They just like, you didn't have to make this movie, but you chose to elevate a movie that explicitly is based on racist tropes, that non-European people could not build their own buildings. They didn't have to do that, but they did. They have thousands of properties they could have made a movie out of instead. But they took one, then tried to sort of tamp down the problematic elements. And I don't know why you do that. I just don't know why you do that.
I don't know for sure, but I know for like when they made Guardians of the Galaxy, they made that film, even though it was disconnected from the entire MCU, because the rights were almost up. Like they had to do something with it in order not for them to lose the rights. So maybe, I'm not saying it is, but maybe something similar, because it is a pretty random edition. Like and apart from one small reference in Think She-Hulk, like in the side of a screen, nothing has been mentioned of Eternals since. Like there's supposed to be like a giant golden head sticking out of the ocean somewhere, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody noticed.
Nobody notices the giant celestial.
Yeah, and I mean at Comic-Con, Eternals 2, I mean, there's no news whatsoever. So it's I don't know. I agree. Like it is like in the chat. It is a choice, as Max is describing it.
I noticed when I watched it, and I've forgotten most of it, to be honest with you, even though I watched it like 2 weeks ago. I was telling Kate that it seemed like they were trying way too hard to really shoehorn Eternals into the phases. They made some references that just were not convincing to me.
Per the themes we've been talking about already of gods, I thought it was interesting that, I mean, in the comic book version, the Eternals are these gods. And then there's also deviants who are sort of devil-like creatures. And I thought it was sort of interesting they stepped away from that and they're like robots now that the Celestials made, right? I think that's how it ended up. Like, it was kind of odd to me when they're embracing deity characters and claiming characters really are gods and all the other Phase 4 materials. I thought it was an unusual step that the Eternals actually were stepped back from deityhood a little bit.
Is that because you think they are more connected to the Western side of deities? I mean, they are, but they aren't, because they all have those funny names, of course, and some of them are less. I mean, Icarus is yeah, okay, but they sort of fit that Western mold a bit more rather than the non-Western ones. And so maybe if they'd written Eternals with more Egyptian influences, perhaps they would have gone in the other direction. But you know, that's all hypothetical at this stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can anyone remember was there a post-credit scene? There must have been a post-credit scene in Eternals. Was it of any relevance? I can't even remember what
it was of relevance for people who simp for Harry Styles, because he appears
That's right.
as Eros. That was the
That's
relevance
right.
that I was told about.
Yeah.
The gays were
Yeah.
all over the place. But yeah, it wasn't. I don't think it. And then there was the other one, the other post-credit scene with the sword with oh my god, his name. Well, he's always Jon Snow for me. Finding
Kit
the
Harington.
sword.
Kit Harington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be Black Knight, I think is that
Yeah.
character's name. Yeah, and the other post credits, it just introduces another Eternals character that gives them another string to pull on if they want.
So it's not like it even had any relevance for the wider sort of.
Thanos's brother, maybe.
I
Right?
don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
Eros
yeah,
is Thanos' brother, so I think they
Yeah.
gotta make this Eros and Thanatos connection. I think they're doing, and the other one was indeed like yeah, what's his Dane Whitman, I think his name is, or the Black Knight is approached by who we think is Blade, played by Mahershala Ali.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
I think it sets up different things, and that was it. No news on that since. I think I read that Harry Styles might not even be returning, so there might be a throwaway scene.
Yeah, it is the in the chat we're being told that it's the closest they got to referencing Thanos as an Eternal. Yeah.
I want to answer
go.
this question about that last HP hero says maybe it makes it easier to dismiss as entertainment because the obvious entertainment is using it for fun instead of presenting it as fact. Oh no, Big Hero! I knew he would do this.
What did he do?
let me enter what he typed. There you go. He says JK, so he's just kidding.
Lol.
God, thanks. And you know that's a really interesting point to make because there are movies that have crossed, you know, the Ancient Aliens line, like with Stargate, but they did it right, you know. So there's like there's a weird line. And Alien versus Predator, I think they were also successful in this, even though it was still ridiculous. But
Alien versus aliens.
Yeah. And yeah, you know, you're right. They weren't presenting it as fact, and they were, as David has pointed out, and others, of course, as well. The names of the Eternals were not the names of the gods, as opposed to in Thor, or that's the opposite. So yeah, I think it is easier to kind of ignore that it is based on Ancient Aliens. Because I didn't even know that they based it on it until you guys told me. So that's interesting. And I'm sure other people have something to add to that.
Yeah, because, well, just as we are discussing this, it made me realize that Ancient Aliens are a part of our cultural repertoire when it comes to history. And the examples you gave me just made me realize how deep and how far they go. And basically, you know, I think that it's very difficult to avoid using this kind of trope because, for better or for worse, it's a part of the common imagination about the history that the majority of people do think to believe that, well, ancient aliens could be true. And when we enter this realm of fantasy, this is one of the first ideas to go to. Like, there is a mysterious artifact, we can't understand it. Well, this is something that we need to pull out. And well, it just makes me realize that, well, I had this discussion with Alex before, that Marvel is at this, MCU is at this stage when there is a really incongruent approach in that, well, we have ancient aliens like gods, which are, the Asgardians and the Eternals. We have the actual gods. We have the avatars and the whole shebang with the, the Egyptian mythology being treated a bit differently. And now we have these almost god characters who seem to be specially designed so that they are just a step removed from the actual character, so that they can say this is not it, but also it, and they are keeping us in this kind of creative tension. And this point of convergence can be a very fruitful place because we have so many mythologies crossing. I call this privately the fantasy kitchen sink, just to go, everything goes together. But at the same time, the problem is that, well, I like to work with narratology approaches, and one of them, the story world approach, demands that at some point you need to set down some rules. And here I think we could go to the next question, which is one of my favorites. What is a god even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? How would you answer that? Because I keep grappling with this.
Can we answer that?
Pass to that. What would they even call it? The Zeus party? You could only go there if you're.
Yes. So how do we disassemble that? Because, well, obviously, I don't want to jump to immortality at first, because, this is something that is a much bigger issue and I think deserves its own idea. But for example, the Love and Thunder, which I think is what theogony is to the Greeks, at least because we get so much about the gods, you can see these examples. And for instance, you see that there are very different gods for different planets, different cultures, and some of them are embodied. The people can walk with them, and people can lose them when they are killed by Golor the Butcher. At the same time, you see that there are gods who are being prayed to, but they seem to be indifferent to that. So basically, the idea is that belief doesn't matter, that they don't need belief to function. And they do have some sort of powers, but there is, which is, I think, incredibly important, a hierarchy of gods, because Zeus is openly dismissive of the so-called minor gods, but nobody ever tells us how do you differentiate between the more and less powerful gods. And this is another joke that I and Alex had, that you should do a midichlorian count on a god and see whether it's powerful or not.
We are not talking about the midichlorians.
No.
We are not going there.
I know.
I will swing the ban hammer here.
Oh, sorry, I'm going out. But yeah, you need to do some kind of test, or maybe it's just a snobby way of discussing the gods and saying these are the gods we don't approve of, so they are the minor gods. So what do you think?
I'm all of a sudden thinking about the Hercules reference now for a second here, because especially with Love and Thunder, Marvel or the MCU has set up there are real gods, and there are fake gods or things that people think are gods but aren't real gods. And now, if they actually bring Hercules in, we're going to have a semi-divine god, a half god, maybe, and they're going to blur that line even further. And it's a very real good question, like, what is a god? And I don't think that, and I can't help but think also with the death of Steve Rogers as Captain America in the MCU, you've gotten rid of the one guy who is like, there is only one God, ma'am. And it's like they've, I don't know. And I wonder how this plays on an international stage too, in a sense, because they're trying to make movies not for, for as many people as possible, really.
Oh, we've seen that. We've seen that with hiding the gaze. Yeah, we know. But there is also, like, attached to like the god issue, there's also the magic issue, right? When we see magic, is it magic or is it alien technology interpreted as magic, right? What do we know about that? Like, now that we've had magic exists, how do we interpret the first Thor movies? Like, how do we go about that? We had some interesting comments in the chat. Actually, one interesting comment in the chat on that. Including the quote unquote, the gods were really ancient aliens in fantasy is often a way to avoid saying that they're actual gods and thus avoid anger in certain segments of the public, or a way to avoid saying that there are actual gods because the author, or I'm adding director, feels some sort of reluctance to say gods are real, even in the context of a fictional work, which is, I think it's true. I think it needs to be recognized. It also opens the door for pseudo-archaeology, unfortunately. Because it's a gateway, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite tidbits just to get out there that, I mean, in 1968, when von Däniken publishes his book, he says, he's using this idea that, magic, that alien technology is so advanced, people are going to think it's magic, and that aliens are going to be viewed as gods. And he presents that as, factual, except it's already a trope in science fiction by the 50s and 60s. It has been repeated over and over and over again in fiction before he claims it's real. Like, this is a much older idea. And I appreciate that. It's a weird thing. I totally agree with Briana. I don't know why, but I find Stargate perfectly fine. like it's totally an ancient alien story, but it doesn't bother me in the way that some of these other ones do. And there is something about, it's like, if it's a deliberate fictional device, and if you're obvious about it being fictional, then sure, I understand that. But when you're hinting, winking, and nodding, and this is even Jack Kirby did this in the notes section in the original comic books, he's like, maybe it's real. And that's where it becomes so problematic.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem we have in Assassin's Creed, right? The moment they start saying, oh, these are historically accurate games, then that's the moment where you really cannot escape the ancient alienism of it all, right? Because then you have to try to make it cohesive, but then is Jesus a sage, right? So because that opens up a whole Pandora's box of how we say in Italian, kicks in the ass.
So Jesus was a space wizard.
Right.
With
So,
midi-chlorians.
Or a space Viking.
Yes, with midi-chlorians, right?
Yeah.
So it is messy. I'm going to step away for 5 minutes because my food is here. But I'll be back. Sorry.
I have just one point here. It just came to me that maybe we should also differentiate between the magic technology and divine power. Because in my material, they are not the same. And you have some characters like Medea or Circe who are shown to use something which is more similar to magic, because they use cauldrons, they brew potions, they have wands, whereas the majority of gods, they don't do this. So maybe this is also another angle that, when we have this question, so what is a god in the MCU? And some characters are saying, oh, you are not worthy of being a god. Or you have Stephen Strange who says, I'm a human with powers of a god. And maybe we also should differentiate between divine power as they see it and magic, which seems to come from something else.
I just love. Oh, sorry, Alex. You go.
No, you go and go.
I love this question. This is something that I've been thinking on for about almost a decade now, and I've done some publishing on it, and I'm hoping to do some more soon. And it's what makes a god, and that thing that you were just pointing out about powers. Is it magic? Is it divine inherent ability, or is it some sort of a totem like with Thor's hammer? And I think Marvel is quickly getting to the point where I think I saw something in the chat, it's getting complex. And I think that's part of the problem, is now we're just expanding so quickly. Initially, we could cope with narrowing down a definition, sort of what is a god, when we only had to deal with the Thor movies and the Asgardians, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., of course, was around about that time as well. It made it much more easier. But now we're expanding quicker than we can keep up with.
Yeah.
And all these different properties are occurring at the same time. And of course, Taika Waititi doing Thor probably isn't talking to the director of, I can't think of a film that was happening at the same time, whatever Marvel property, Moon Knight, for example. And so they're coming up with ideas. Is there some sort of governing MCU definition that they're working with? I don't think so. Like, they've got their source materials. They're also taking liberties from the comic books and drawing on all sorts of things. And so to sit down and go, what is a god, is so inherently problematic, because I don't think the MCU is asking that question. And I also think it's a wider problem. If we can just mention DC Comics briefly, it's a problem that they're struggling with many of the same things. I don't know if anyone has seen Black Adam, but in that movie, Dr. Fate is described basically the same as our magic user, Sorcerer Supreme, he has godlike, he's got godlike magic powers, is how they describe Dr. Fate. So basically the same question. And in Wonder Woman comic books, we have a fantastic battle of essentially a version of Thor the God Butcher, Battle of the Gods, and they go up through the pantheon and destroy all the gods from various pantheons and that sort of thing. So it's a wider question within popular culture as well, as what is a god, and it's unique to the MCU and how they deal with some of their tropes and because of their popularity, but at the same time it's also a wider question that extends well beyond the MCU, and I think that's influencing, as with any form of mass media, that's influencing both how we as audience members and how the creative directors are approaching that question.
Thinking how they're going to continue to blur this line. Again, I don't want to speculate too much about Wakanda Forever, but with the Namor in the trailers, they identify him as Kukulkan, and which is a feathered serpent deity from the Maya, who is analogous or similar to Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent deity from Central Mesoamerica. And we're right at a point where someone who is a deity, but sometimes a culture hero, in the original sources. Sometimes he's described as a real person who's just a famous culture hero, and sometimes it's an actual deity. And so, and they're actually now drawing on source material that's not specific always about whether we're talking about a person or a divine form.
I think it's also very revealing in Love and Thunder when Jane picks up Mjolnir and she gets her godly powers. She is described as a Thor, like in She-Hulk, for example. When Jennifer gets her powers, she's a Hulk, or Falcon is the next Captain America. So Thor, the name of a god, an individual character, becomes the title. So it's almost like the gods are sort of losing their individual identity, at least, or in a way. Like it literally is a title, and those who are worthy of the title can pick Mjolnir up, like Cap or like Vision. And then at the end of the film, when Jane dies, she dies in the same way as Odin died, as the other gods died. Like it's this gold dusty thing that flies in the air, and she's in the post-credit scene, she goes to Valhalla. So it's what is a god? Is it a transferable title? Like, is it something that even a human, a mere mortal like Jane can achieve purely by picking Mjolnir up, because she does go to Valhalla?
She's
immortal,
just
but she's also something.
Sorry, she's immortal, but she's also not, because she got infected with the Infinity Stone in Thor 2. So we can kind of explain it away. She is, but she's not. If we want to get pedantic,
Yeah, but you just made me realize something, and actually, it's true what I've been telling you, that looking at this modern stuff makes you rearrange your knowledge about ancient mythology. Because there is this huge debate in the field of Greek religion whether Greek gods are powers, persons, or functions. And I think this goes really well to what's going on in the MCU, that, you see that a god can be a function, like it happens with Jane. A god can have a sort of a power, and a god can be a person. And here I think they are playing both three fields here, and they aren't really decided which way to go right now.
And I don't know if this makes any difference to what you guys have already said, but it's almost like Thor made Jane Thor, because he whispered into the hammer, protect her. And if he hadn't done that, would she ever have become a Thor? So it's also like, can gods make other gods, I guess? He
did in the Love and Thunder. He gave his power to a bunch of Asgardian children, right? And he made them mini Thors just for a limited amount of time, so there is a time limitation. Which don't dare to become gods.
Very
problematic. I'm like, why didn't you do that when you were fighting Thanos? You mean you could have turned everybody
exactly
and like.
But that was a perfect example, because he used Zeus' thunderbolt to sort of activate these powers. So now I'm sitting there and thinking, okay, so he's making everybody a Thor by using Zeus' stolen power. Okay.
And is that building on that Avatar trope that we see in Moon Knight for example. And so now that we've had avatars be a thing, suddenly we've got Thor. Is he making them a god, or is he making them avatars of himself now that he's more powerful? And I think that's another thing as well, is we see Thor, I think Alex mentioned this sort of vaguely in his PowerPoint. Thor is a learning sort of journey on what it means to be god/hero, and he grows in power as the movies go on. So is this sort of him coming to terms with he's leveling up, to sort of a gaming terminology, and so now he's becoming closer to being a god? Maybe he was one of the minor gods before, and now he's now that he's defeated Zeus, he's a major god, and so now he can imbue avatars the same way that the Egyptian major gods can. And this is all completely speculative, and I'm making it up as I go along. But
I can imagine Thor in a god school saying, "This will be an exam: how to imbue mortals with your power."
Yeah.
For a limited amount of time only. But I think in Love and Thunder, Star-Lord specifically, and I think it's quite symbolic, says to Thor, like, you're 1,500 years old and you still haven't figured out who you are. So it's like, is he a god? Is he a hero? And then in the post-credit scene, in the Hercules one, Zeus is angry with the heroes because the humans don't worship the gods anymore. All they look to the skies, they look up to their heroes, to their avengers, and the gods of old have lost their power. But Thor is one of those heroes. So if people look up to the sky and they wait for Thor, are they waiting for a hero, or are they waiting for a god? Because does that deprive Thor of his godhood if Zeus says that they only look up to him as a hero? And if it does, then why did he not say that earlier in Omnipotent City? Because then he literally affirms that Thor is a god. So it's like Maciej said, it needs to have some sort of rules, and in something as huge as the MCU, I think there might be multiple rules, even or even culture-specific rules, but even within the one film, the rules get blurred or transgressed.
David said in the chat that maybe this conflict in the portrayal of gods in the MCU has to do with the credibility that the very creators perceived in the power-growing characters in the roots of the movie 15 years ago. So sometimes I perceive that they are trying to bring consistency to characters that they just treated in a funny or playful way, and then generates the crushing perception when they nod and wink today. And it says, in contrast with Alan Moore's Watchmen, that was all about mixing, reality heroes, superheroes. I think that like trying to bring everything together and make everything part of the same universe brings out the consistency issue, because things that you made canon 15 years ago, now you have to retcon. And there's also the issue of, can a god be a hero? Can a hero be a god? How about a demigod? Do they exist? Do they work? Do we have like tiered, sort of heroes like in Saint Seiya, depending on the armor you're wearing? Like real nerds here. So, and also what are the internal, like, does every pantheon has internal rules? Because when we watch Moon Knight, for instance, the gods are very hands-off in the things. They're like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. But, if someone is trying to mess everything up, then we can lock them into a statuette that can be broken by humans, ? So why are they even doing that, considering that they're into something that can be broken? It's right, like, it's trying to bring consistency to something that probably was not conceived with consistency in mind, but also opening up a lot of interesting avenues to kind of go around the limits that the material itself imposes. I just wish they had given us better Egyptian gods in Moon Knight.
I've been a little surprised with Phase 4 that, when Phase 4 sort of started to take shape and it became clear they were doing a multiverse take, I've been surprised they haven't leaned into the multiverse just a little bit more, because they could just sort of like knock out all of this discussion by saying like different multiverses. Just,
it would have been perfect. It would have been perfect, right? It would have been the easy way out.
Yeah,
And it was I mean, the multiverse that we saw for 10 seconds in Multiverse of Madness opened up those possibilities, but then they were like, yeah, nah, there is one Temple of Chthon in the whole multiverse, so conveniently we'll destroy them one, and every other, you know, and the Darkhold will stop existing in every multiverse. So, but then in, what's it, Endgame? That like you can destroy things. There are points of convergence of the multiverse, because otherwise you screw up everything. So
Who sets up these rules and when we can find the guidebook?
right. Probably the guy. What if the guidebook was the Darkhold, and now it doesn't exist anymore? Right? We're messed up. We're messed up.
I think if you've seen the finale of She-Hulk, they literally show you who makes the rules in that episode. But it's interesting, like with the multiverse as well, like because they say the Book of Vishanti, there's only one for the entire multiverse, right? That there's no copies, but then you go there, and then in the background you see these floating Greek columns and temple facades. It's sort of like this is ancient, but it's also like it's fantasy. Like it's a weird blend, and I think that that type of blend is representative for the entire MCU, and also like I think the rules are the worst in the Eternals. Like we don't know. Are they the inspiration for the gods? Are they inspired by the gods? I mean, in the comics there are explanations, but the film that does not make those connections, I think.
And I think genre also plays a role here in this broader discussion. And I'm thinking specifically of Taika Waititi. I mean, I love him because he's a fellow Kiwi, and some of his other works. But he's clearly just playing some things for laughs in his Thor movies. And those are some of the more problematic elements, like rock beats scissors. I mean, those sorts of things. And so that compared to, for example, Moon Knight, which is a very sort of serious, it's taking itself very seriously. Especially with some of the themes of mental illness and those sorts of things. It has to, and so that also changes what rules we apply and how we're going to do it. And I think that problematizes this whole multiverse sort of complexity that's going on.
I think we should also point out, we were talking about Moon Knight and the avatars in Moon Knight, but Egyptian mythology, correct me if I'm wrong, did not have the concept of avatar, right? That's something from Hinduist mythology, I believe.
The Egyptian gods would never.
Don't you think that MCU is just playing Will It Blend World Mythologies edition? It does.
Egyptian gods are too good for that. They also in Moon Knight, they also made like what is essentially like a minor, very minor demon into a god for reasons it didn't really need to be. Like it's not, it was, even in the comics, it was a baffling choice to me that they had Amit as this evil creature, because Amit is not the cause of your punishment. She's like literally her tummy is the end of it.
She's the paper shredder.
Yeah, she's the paper shredder. She's you know, she eats the souls. It was a good, in terms of like pop culture in Egypt, it was a good deviation from having Anubis being the villain for once. But there are so many other good options that they could have had. I mean, give us a terrifying sect. Give us chaos for the sake of chaos. Not
Apophis.
Right, give us Apophis. Give us like something that doesn't have like an end, like a teleological ending to it, like a teleological purpose to it. Just give us chaos for the sake of it, which is way more terrifying than just, oh, we need to judge people, right? Sometimes we don't need the villains to be understandable. We don't need to sympathize with them, right? We just, you know, they may need to be terrified.
Every villain has to have a sub story these days.
Oh my God, yes, that's a Maleficent effect, which I hate. The only exception to that is Wicked, but that's because I'm a theater, musical theater gay.
It's Wicked. Okay, and at this point, I know that it's a big topic, but I would like to bring it out for a while. So, okay, let me put my Hades impression. Pain, panic, I got a riddle for you. How do you kill a god?
Well,
Well, you have this magical sword that comes up to you.
He says kill, kill, kill.
Um,
Yeah,
no, I
but
think,
I did this in Love and Thunder, and it's so inconsistent. Like, they tell, oh, let's go to Zeus, let's get his thunderbolts, it's a super weapon. And then, you see so many people getting thrown with the thunderbolt, and oh, it hurt, I got better. And even in the final fight, you see it's not, the end and all weapon. It's just like, so you can kill him, but you can't. And why do they fear death at all? So what do you think about this? Because, honestly, I couldn't make sense. It seemed like they were making rules as they went along.
And related question is, how do you kill a superhero?
Yeah.
For example, Captain America, we can't just kill him off. He's got to die of old age, having, gone back in time and lived his life to the fullest. We can't ever kill Thor. He can lose an eye, but then he's going to get it back again. Like, we can kill Odin, but that's because he's old and sort of he's done his duty and passing on the baton to the next generation and those sorts of things. And then now, of course, we're back to gods rather than superheroes. So I think it's all connected to this concept, because the gods in these films are also heroes. It goes hand in hand, and we don't like to kill our heroes. Thinking of I forget which the movie it is, but the Scarlet Witch's brother dies, of course. He's only been in the film for half the film, and then we kill him off rather than Hawkeye, because we can't kill Hawkeye because he's such a essential part of the Avengers, but someone's got to die to bring some pathos to the sort of sacrifice, and so we're going to kill him off. And
Quicksilver.
Yes,
Pietro.
yes, yeah, Pietro, sorry, Quicksilver. Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's how much I engaged with his character. I can't even remember his name. So that worked really well for the directors. And so we can kill him off, but then, like we were saying earlier, there's a question of where does him and Scarlet Witch fit in? Are they even superheroes? Have sort of been given their powers. This is before she's sort of inherently magical, those sorts of things. So all sorts of problems here. It's not just how do we kill gods, it's how do we kill anyone we like, because which comes to the commercialism of the MCU. We don't want to kill off someone who's popular. And Loki. Yeah, we just ended up in a world with 1,000 Loki variants.
Yeah, I really like that you use the word pathos, because I think this is something that really comes to the forefront in Love and Thunder, because it's a very comic movie. We can all agree about this, and it's funny. But, well, what I think is the key to Greek mythology is that it's difficult, it's painful, and it's cruel, and death matters. Usually you can't go back, and even if you can, usually there's a price to pay. And here, it seems like death is cheap in that the gods can die, but they sort of return, and Jane sort of dies, but then we see she isn't really dead. I mean, she is somewhere in Valhalla or whatever. So I think the problem is that, well, the MCU doesn't really strike this right balance between pathos and comicism, and they've been sliding into comic mode too much. And now they are trying to backtrack, but it's super difficult to do, especially if they want to do it quickly, as they try to do in Love and Thunder by the ending scenes that you have, this whole scene in Eternity when they're trying to resurrect his daughter and all that. It was very quick and very difficult. And I don't think it was very effectual, because they never said the rules of death matters. It looked like, well, she's dead. Why should I feel sorry for this girl? Like, there's a rampage of death, but it doesn't really seem important. And then we see Zeus die. Zeus and Thor says he killed him. And suddenly Zeus is okay. So, there's this constant flipping back and forth. And I don't think this is good for the tone of the movie.
I mean, I'm hanging out for a catabasis to occur in a movie, whether we're going back to get Scarlet Witch or not Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, or if we're going to go get Gamora, Jane, who knows? I'm hanging out for, there's got to be at some point one of these heroes wants to go get their lost love, and we've got Orpheus 2.0.
They kind of did that with the alternate universe version of Gamora, right? Which raises questions of consent. Plenty of questions of consent.
Yeah,
right?
which is where my Scarlet Witch thing came from, where she's looking for her boys, of course, across the universe. But now that we have actual afterlives, the ancestral plane and Valhalla and those sorts of things, it's only a small step to go from journeying across the multiverse to look for your deceased loved ones to journeying to the underworld or the afterlife to get your loved ones. At which point death really becomes completely irrelevant. And so you really can't kill gods, because you can't kill normal people, because you can just bring them back.
The Black Widow movie is jumping out to me at this point too, because you can kill the character and like, oh, but we'll just tell another story from earlier on. yeah. Chronological.
I would say Vision died in Infinity War, and Kevin Feige said, "Oh, all deaths in Infinity War are final. Name one death in Infinity War that wasn't reversed, or the character was brought back in a different version." And now they are there's rumors of this Vision Quest series as well. Like there's no. I think last HP Hero said it in the chat. Superhero death is temporary, always has been. I think it's sort of this problem of consecutive or prolonged storytelling. If you want to talk about, if you're telling stories of decades, the decades of duration, and I think they've dug themselves in a bit of a hole with the multiverse, because now there is literally the opportunity to do everything literally, but they are constrained by their own limits of budget, of scope, of scale. Like in Multiverse of Madness, where was Vision? Like in all of the different universes where Wanda is with her boys, Vision is nowhere to be found.
Or there is no universe in which the boys are orphaned and she could adopt them.
Yeah, for example.
Right, let's go tragic.
I think there's this tension between what the narrative possibilities are and what the creative slash financial feasibility perhaps is.
I think
And
unless
it removes
the What If show, I don't think Tony Stark has come back in any form since.
No.
He will have a successor, an heir.
Ironheart's coming, right?
Yeah. There was the thing, but not yet. So
don't we see a clip of that in the trailer for Wakanda?
Yeah.
There's Iron Man-esque thing.
Yeah, we do, I think.
I just thought of something. Daredevil is not part of MCU, and there's a major component of Catholicism in Daredevil, and I'm wondering how they're going to incorporate that into the addition of other gods and
give us alternate universe Jesus.
Although Daredevil is now part of She-Hulk, so now is part of MCU, but isn't. Like, it's that weird sort of, okay, your Matt Murdock's here, your costume's the same but slightly different, your backstory's the same but slightly different. That sort of, that problem of the retconning of the sort of that television, it was really that high point of the movies versus the television series, wasn't it, where Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones were their own separate, I guess they're part of a different multiverse, would be the formal explanation now.
I just had an idea that, well, just going back into some points that we've made, is that, well, you could consider the MCU from the perspective of transformative media. And we've made this remark before that, it's expanding quicker than we can cope. And I think in many franchises that stay vital and important to its fans, The question is that, you have entries which are spaced in such intervals that the fandom community can actually make sense of what has happened. And I think this is very important because this fan impulse is just the place where the fan theories are born, when the people are trying to explain some of the plot inconsistencies, so on and so forth. And you can see that this is actually something that's very restorative, and it makes fandoms vital because the fans can actually, sort of understand what is going on, especially with the movies, which have to leave so much material out. But here, I think the MCU is going so fast that, the fans just cannot cope. They cannot cope, and it's going too quickly for them. And we have several different media because we have the TV shows, the comics, now the movies and all that. And I wonder whether the problem is maybe they should slow down with the phases and the plans and so many movies each year. Maybe this is the solution for them, that let that people breathe and think about what's going on and formulate some own theories and make sense of the universe. I don't know what you think.
I think that letting people grieve does not agree with Disney's policies, huh? Apart from Bambi and Dumbo. Right? But here's the thing. I think that there is something to be said about the fact that some TV shows and some products, for instance, Game of Thrones, were so shocking because people are not used to seeing their favorite characters dying anymore. Because we get attached, and then there's, the series, the sequel, the spin-off, and they never die. So when someone dies, capital D dies, then now it's kind of revolutionary, right? And especially in a superhero war, there's always, it's gonna come back, or it's gonna, none of the Robins ever die in the CU. They just come back, maimed with a hood, but they just come back. Which from a marketing perspective, it makes sense because it's difficult to just build a new character from zero and get people attached to it and just give up completely another character. But on the other, especially in the MCU, it really cheapens the attachment personally, it cheapens the attachment that we feel to these characters because they never really gone, which is why probably a lot of people were pissed off, rightfully, when they had no issues killing, Black Widow for the plot, right? She didn't have to, but the plot said she had to die, and Gamora too. Why is it always the women that are sacrificed in this way, right?
That's what I was going to say. Woman.
Apart from Pietro, but that was also made no sense at all, because if Quicksilver has one power, is being faster than that thing, right? He should be faster than light. So it's just, but it's true, and we cannot give people time to, if we kill a character, then we cannot allow people to grieve, right? Because that would be bad press, that would be bad publicity. Even Wanda, the whole chthonic temple fell down on her. Of course she's still alive. I mean, she has a contract for the next 7 years, so of course, and thank goodness, because she's one of the best actresses in the MCU. But we need to the character. I wish they showed us more of the characters grieving other characters. I wish they explored more the consequences of what is going on, which is something that, weirdly enough, the Zack Snyder edition of Justice League did with the destruction of Gotham, right? We fight, we kill people, we kill giant monsters in a city that is inhabited, we kill people, and then we need to pay off, right? Pay for the consequences, right? Because there are consequences. The MCU has none of that. Apart
maybe
from
Thor.
Moon Knight, sort of Thor, of.
He goes into depression, right?
Right. But then it's played for laughs because, he has a dead bod now. And WandaVision, which is completely invalidated by Multiverse of Madness immediately, right?
You do have Spider-Man mourning Tony Stark as a father figure.
Right.
That's probably the closest you'd get.
That's the closest thing. Yeah. But it's and then, yes, and then you have the funeral, and then that's it. We forget about him. We don't talk about him, right? That has been sanitized to that point that we cannot really talk about it. And even the goddess of death, that is a character in the comics, has become sexy Kate Blanchett. There is a disconnect. I think that's also part of quote unquote Western culture that we do not talk about death. We do not talk about
Mhm.
grief, which is why probably WandaVision was liked, because finally we're talking about grief and unhealthy ways of coping with grief that are not drinking yourself to death, which is overdone in TV shows and media, or drugs, I guess. So it's been cheapened, but marketing does not allow people to just drop characters like that. I guess that is the long-winded point that I was trying to say. I saw that the chat is being crazy, so I'm gonna go check the chat. I'll let you guys talk.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see in terms of the topic of grief how Black Panther Wakanda Forever will deal with that, I think, because they have said it is set a year after the character T'Challa's death in the universe as well. So that's going to be interesting, I think. But continuing, I mean, the various points that we've made here, for example, about the rules that are blurry, or the fact that Daredevil is one of the, I think David said, apart from Captain America, that there's no one to say there's one God or Christian God. I think Daredevil will maybe fill that role, maybe, depending on what his character is like. But what do you think? Because we've been reevaluating the current MCU. What are your thoughts or your hopes or your concern about the future? Because as the Thor: Love and Thunder post-credit scene shows, they are obviously still invested in having these theomachies in the MCU, with Hercules going after Thor, or like what I mean. Eventually, at some point, Thor is gonna get in touch with the Eternals, with Moon Knight, with Miss Marvel, with Daredevil. Do you think when all these characters will start to interact, do you think these different traditions will become more distinct from one another, like saying this is how we do it and this is a different culture? Or do you think they'll be more blurred, it will be more of a mess than it already is? And of course, this is an impossible question because it's the future. But what do you expect? What do you think might happen?
I'm still waiting for some kind of thing to happen with Adam from the end credits of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Please.
And so there's also this possibility that nothing will happen, and it's just like, I don't know, a dead end or something. So,
but don't you want to see his blonde haircut and his fabulous clothes?
I just want to know what that's about. I don't even care if there's a movie. Just like give us a footnote or something.
Girl.
A throwaway line in a movie, just so we know what happened. The planet got destroyed and he perished, but we just need to know.
and now the High Priestess is playing Diana Spencer in The Crown, so there's gonna be some time there.
I mean, Adam Warlock was cast for Guardians 3, so it is a big part of Guardians 3.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, there you go. All right. So
he's played by, who is it? Will Poulter, I think. From one of the Narnia movies, I think.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Yeah, it's been a while since they did that. One thing that I'm always curious about, because I don't really keep up with the TV show ones, and I just feel like they are, as you said, they're pumping out too much at once. And I think that part of that is the TV shows, and a lot of people are consuming them as fast as they can because they're thinking maybe this will have some kind of effect on like what I need to know with the movies. So I think that there is an issue of continuing to bring too much. I don't know what that's going to do for the future.
When we talk about the future of the MCU, I'm actually excited and hesitant and all the feelings for Hercules. That's one of the figures that I do talk about. I mean, the last decent, if we want to use that word, Hercules on screen was, of course, The Rock.
Of course, thank you.
Who also shared his debut as Hercules with Kellen Lutz of Twilight fame, and a very lesser known B-grade film of Hercules that came out with another wrestler. So I'm really interested to see where they go with Hercules, since there's been also by the time it comes out, it would have been a decade probably, since the last Hercules on the screen. I'm also really interested about how they are interacting with the supernatural side of things, thinking vampires. You know, we've got Blade, how that's going to fit into things. How do vampires fit into this whole divinity thing?
That's when you need the Catholics with the crosses.
Yes, that's how they're going to do it.
That's the crossover.
That's it.
Yeah.
Marvel,
You
are you
Crossover,
listening?
Kate.
you need the crosses in the holy water to kill the vampires. Full circle. Yeah, there we go. That's how they're going to do it. So I'm interested to see how you're going to end up with these. Immortal figures who are not gods. In the MCU, or if they, you know, basically, what are they going to do with vampires? And then will we get werewolves? Because, you know, the two go hand in hand so often. So I think I'm not holding my breath for anything sort of you know, outstanding, but I think it's just going to be interesting to see where they go.
I'm definitely holding my breath with Wakanda Forever, because I don't know how many people know the character of Namor. Like Namor, who is one of Marvel's oldest characters, and they're doing a serious retcon by here sort of making him not from Atlantis, but from this new Talokan place, and they're tiptoeing up to another pseudo-archaeological theme. Where like there are lots of 19th century texts that claim, well, the Maya, or they couldn't have built those pyramids, they must have been Atlanteans or something like this. And since I'm kind of wondering, like, will people buy Namor or Namor as from Talokan, or will they just like, oh yeah, will they recognize it as just like fake Atlantis and then put us right back in this place where like Mesoamerican culture is given as an Atlantean origin rather than an indigenous origin? And that's definitely, like, they're really close to the line on this one. I don't know how they're going to play it.
And is that an attempt to just distinguish him from Aquaman?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think a lot of it's that.
Basically, yeah. So I hope they do it justice from an indigenous perspective, not just that we need to separate ourselves from DC, and that's sort of just the reason for it.
Someone in the chat is saying it will also be interesting to see what, if any, effect the release of God of War Ragnarok will have on fans' perception of Norse divinities. There was the whole discussion about Thor's body when the first concepts of God of War came out, because, you know, Chris Hemsworth is, well, definitely
ripped.
not how right. I was trying to find a non-thirsty term, but it's definitely not like Thor should be, right? He's a heavy drinker and heavy eater. And then when the concept art for the game came out, there was a big clash. So I do think, let me rephrase this into a question. Do we think that the MCU has had an effect on how people visualize deities in their minds?
Oh yeah.
If we are seeing deities.
Yeah, definitely. I think they have such a gravitational pull that basically, I don't know if you've noticed this, but well, whenever Thor fights with his thunderbolt powers, there's always this blue sparkly light within his eyes. And it's not a new motive, it's been done before, I think, but ever since, when you have depictions of Zeus, of any god who is sort of associated with thunderbolts, this bluish light and them having bluish eyes that's just sort of light up with the power of the thunder is just become a staple. So I think there is a huge gravitational influence on that. And I'm just wondering what's going to happen with the remainder of the gods, especially with this new sort of foray into the area of Greek mythology and Mesoamerican mythology and all the different ways. So I think that these are going to be the texts. And mostly because through the power of the GIFs, and all this modern popular social media culture, because they are going to be one of the most important tracts for the people to share and, diffuse among themselves. So they will be definitely very important.
May I say they are going to be gifts of the gods? I'll see myself here.
I have to tell you something. One of my hopes for the next Marvel phase is that, especially for you, Kate, that crosses and holy water will turn out to be super ancient alien technology.
I would
No.
love that.
How did we not have more puns?
I
What's
know.
wrong with
Starting
us?
up.
We've been too serious. Man, this is wow. Look at us. Look at us.
I think we're overreacting to the Marvel. We said it was too comic, so we are trying to be the serious ones here.
Restore
You
the
know,
balance.
like lightning coming out of eyes and things would do very well for whatever they're going to do next with Moon Knight, because ancient Egyptian gods would actually have fire come out of their eyeballs.
Yeah,
Mm.
and Spitfire
Yeah.
on occasion. We'll see. I think the chat is talking about Aztec Batman animated thing that will come out, so that's going to be interesting. Although they're saying my only point of hesitation is that they're tying Joker to Huitzilopochtli instead of Tezcatlipoca. But the Joker design also has the smoking mirror symbolism. For those who don't know, Tezcatlipoca is one of the gods of death of the Aztec, and one of his feet is a smoking mirror, in which you can see the future. It's fantastic. It's incredible. Also, Two-Face is an injured Cortez after his expedition failed. Okay, this is an interesting thing. We will see. I don't have a lot of faith in the DC anymore, but we'll see what they can do. I mean, have I ever? I also wanted to say about the Heracles foray of Marvel. I damn hope they cast Greek actors. If they want to give us the accents, at least give us the people who have the right accent, right? And let's not do Themyscira 2.0, in which even people who are born and raised in the US were trying to have a Mediterranean accent, and they sounded absolutely gross, right? Let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's move past that. Let's have people with their own accents play the gods. I mean, you know.
Will Russell Crowe return as Zeus for the?
I'm fine with that. Like, if he says Aussie, 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 oi, 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 why throw in the Thunderbolt? I'm fine with that. I love
He did
that.
say Yasas, didn't he?
He did.
Hello, all the gods. Yasas.
Did you know? Like, I heard that there. So the Greek accent was a specific acting choice by Russell Crowe himself. So Taika wanted it to be in a normal British or English rather accent, or Aussie, but Russell Crowe insisted, so they had to shoot each shot twice, once in the English, once in the Greek accent, and then later they picked what they wanted. But can you imagine how bad the English version has to be if they went with the Greek
Yeah.
nonetheless? I mean, it's just not good. And the weird thing is, I had Greek friends come up to me and they said, I liked his accent, like it sounds Greek, but does it? I don't think it did. But
I'm not entirely sure. The accent of the Egyptian gods was quite spot on, though. Like when they were speaking English, they were
So
like,
it was Arabic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're like the Egyptian flavor of accent. Which was, you know, it made sense. Although we still have bureaucrat Osiris, and then the
Could
big
have been
villains.
Disco Osiris.
I'd rather have Disco Osiris. Overall, the big villains didn't have an Egyptian, like an Arabic accent at all, which was kind of disappointed in that, right? Or the gods, like the gods that with which we interact more. Questionable choices.
This is a big problem, isn't it? That, well, it's very difficult for all the big franchises to actually cast actors who are the proper nationality, because they are cashing on big names who are mostly, you know, Anglo-American, Australian, and all that. So it's super difficult.
There was the problem with Gods of Egypt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And with Exodus, Gods and Kings, right? When they said, "Oh, I can't cast, you know, Mohammed, what's his name, from Egypt to play an Egyptian god," I was like, "Well, actually, you should." I would argue.
Yeah. It's slowly changing, I think, thanks to the cultural osmosis, because, well, And I think Marvel and DC are actually helping in that. For instance, there is this new Netflix series, Chaos, about Greek gods, and they cast, I think, Maori actor as Poseidon, which is incredible. But I was looking into that, and I think that what paved the way was that you have certain cultural characters like Aquaman, who was obviously, you have this sort of osmosis that first you got the Aquaman who is, who has the ancestry, and then it sort of coalesces in the minds of people. So, okay, so we sort of start to associate Polynesians with the sea. So, and it's only a small jump to the Greek god of the sea. So you can do this, but it's very early. It cannot be done in a way that seems like it's been a diversity choice. It has to be grown organically.
Yeah.
So I actually have a bit of hope for this. So the more you do this in very small but consequential ways, then actually you can go to the point where these choices will seem to be more and more natural. And this is one of my wishes for the future, that they will do this in a very tasteful and well done way, and eventually may arrive at a situation when you can actually do a colorblind casting.
Yeah, we've been seeing that on the red carpet for Wakanda Forever with the actors who play Namor and all the people from that side, from that culture, civilization, what do we want to call it, actually sporting like their own cultural symbols and attire and everything, which has been really well done. So I hope that is the direction in which we are going. Right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, less Atlantis, more Mayans.
Then they would have to sort of get away with this illusion that these are almost gods, as we were discussing tonight, that these are somehow gods, but not quite.
I wanna see the flying corn. I wanna see the flying corn heads. That's what I want to see. And more jade stuff, to be honest. Right? I'm thinking about like Pakal's temple and his mask and the pearl.
It's good ear spools.
And I do hope they will differentiate between the Olmec, the Aztec, the Maya. It's not the same.
Right, it's not all
I
like
have very low expectations that they're going to recognize diversity within Mesoamerica.
Right. Like they surprised us with Egypt in Moon Knight, so now we'll see, and with China and Shang-Chi, so we'll see what happens, and with Miss Marvel, we'll see what happens in like the big, right?
That makes me bring up a question that isn't exactly related to gods, but for Black Panther, they specifically pulled from different cultures in the African continent and mixed them together. Hello, Kat.
Which one is this? Oh,
this is Tamu.
the baby.
Still healing from her wound. So they pulled from different African cultures to make within Black Panther, they had different cultures. And so they were inspired by that. And I'm wondering, can we say that that's different from applying different Mesoamerican cultures?
It's a good question, because it's one of those, like, it kind of goes both ways, where I can see it's a really good thing. It's a really good way to inspire and to not make a specific reference, but a general reference. But one of the things that always jumps to my mind, I haven't done this, I think it's been about 2 weeks since I've done this, so maybe I'm wrong, but it's been true for about the last 10 years. You can go Google Maya calendar, and the images that come up are for the Aztec sunstone. It's like different languages, different cultures from different time periods with different religious beliefs. And it's like, there's a way where this can become, oh, I don't care, it's all those people. Like, it's, there's a way where it's either carefully constructed reference or it is ignoring diversity. And I don't know, it's like it kind of looks the same, but you're coming from very different directions. And so I don't know what's going to happen here.
It's also part of the mythology of Wakanda, is that they are different tribes who come together around the meteorite, of course, and then form this homogenized sort of thing, and they all have their own sort of spheres of influence. And what I find interesting with Namor's filmic depiction, and it seems to be that they're sort of, and this ties back into the comic, drawing on the comic tradition, is they seem to be the other side of the coin to Wakanda. So it'll be interesting to see if they are likewise sort of a race that draws upon multiple things as part of their mythological history, or if it's basically a mishmash of
We didn't care.
we need something Mesoamerican. Let's throw that gobbledygook on the wall because it looks right or feels right to our Western sensibilities more than anything else.
Exactly, but you know what makes it better in this situation? Because for instance, for me personally, I would love to see that somebody picked one culture and then they went, you know, to the town of it. Like, you know, they really placed this in a concrete historical context and they made it work. But well, you could argue that for Wakanda, you know, it's a very techno nation, it's new, so maybe it was a conscious decision to blend, but for me, it's still a bit wishy-washy. I would like to have the other way, but this is my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it will be very interesting to see how that all develops, and I remain. I think in the chat that the official term was cautiously optimistic about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I think someone else in the chat pointed out that on the red carpets for the film they were wearing I mean they were showcasing the culture, and I think that is something different than what we had seen with Eternals and with Love and Thunder. I also think
but we did see that, didn't we? Because it just came to me that, you know, also in Love and Thunder, you know, the architecture in the Omnipotent City, it's not Greek per se. I would say it's Greek Roman taken up to 11 with some Byzantine influences. And it just made me realize that when we have this big cultural conglomerate in the imagination of the people, that, you know, the Mesoamerica is all the same. So Aztec, Olmec, Maya, whatever. But the Greece and Rome are basically the same. So like the people don't differentiate too much between the Greek and Roman architecture. It's all the same for them. The culture looks similar. They may know that there were two different languages among so many, but they aren't really sure. And, you know, it seems like there are some cultural continuums that are taken, like, and Egypt is separate because it's so unique and distinct that it looks differently. But the rest of the Africa is basically all lumped together. Greece and Rome is lumped together. The Viking culture is lumped together. The American, you know, the natives, you know, the Americans are lumped together with some slight differences between the North America, Mesoamerica, Southern America, all that. But, you know, the differentiation level is only connected to the importance to the culture that is recreating these cultures, in this case, the Western culture. So you can see that, you know, the Greek mythology is rather important. So, you know, you have some kind of distinction, but the remainder of them, not so much. And it only goes to show that, you know, well, I am really wondering about what's going to happen. Are they going to sort of dismantle these broader stereotypes, or they're going to keep them in these nice boxes when people just kind of lump everything they think about when they're thinking about this concrete culture in the historical area?
I think it would be nice if they could dismantle it, but at the same time, it's Disney, it's Marvel Studios. I'm a bit scared in that regard. In that part, I'm not cautiously optimistic. No, I think we will. I mean, of course, it will remain to be seen how much they actually call Talocan Mesoamerican, or if it's just Talocan specifically, and they don't explicitly make the ties in the film itself. Although in Love and Thunder in the credits they did say Aztec god, so we'll see. I think.
What kind of a god?
Yeah, what kind of god, and who is it? Is it just like a regular person dressed up with stereotypical Aztec or Mesoamerican art? I mean, it's. I think for Taika Waititi, it's all the same, as long as he's able to fit in a joke every 10 seconds.
Goats.
Go the screaming goats, which, I mean, there's a mythological. I mean, they have Norse names, I think, but still, they were Taylor Swift memes.
They are space goats.
They are cosmic space goats. I also see that we've been going for about 2 hours, which is almost as long as an actual Marvel movie. So
Avengers assemble.
Avengers assemble.
Are we gonna have a post-credit scene?
Yeah,
Ooh, that's a good question.
There
So
you go.
if anyone has any final thoughts or conclusions or things they want to say or events, publications, websites they want to pull to what they want to plug, I mean, I think now is your chance. Or in the chat if there's any final pressing questions.
I just had a quick thought. We were talking about Catholicism, and isn't Moon Knight's character Jewish?
Yes, he is.
True.
So
he is.
visibly Jewish, and so
Yeah.
we do have a link there potentially already to Yahweh.
We are also told that on Earth 66 there is Jesus, so there is that.
Yeah.
So well, at least one exists. In our post-credit scene, we're gonna see Brianna's third cat.
On my pile of
Who is
clothes.
Hercules?
Yes. Yes.
I don't mind showing you my pile of clothes.
Where is
There.
she?
Ah, yeah.
There she
Oh,
is.
wow.
Oh,
Where's my-
Perfect.
there.
she's beautiful.
Where cats love to be, don't they? On
Yeah.
the
The real gods of the internet.
Yeah.
That's very true. That's very true.
Oh, that could be the overarching MCU theory. The cats were the gods all along.
If they told us that cats are ancient aliens that colonized us, I'd be like, yeah, that checks out. I agree. They taught us how to use litter boxes. I'm like, yeah, I see that. I drop stuff. I see that. I would be open to that possibility. I mean, we already worship them, so that's fine.
It'll be historically accurate if they have us worship cats.
Mhm.
All right.
Exactly.
So thanks everyone. I think this was fantastic. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think there's so much to talk about. I think we are at this point where I mean I don't think we could have had this roundtable to this extent like 5 years ago with the MCU. Like they really started to explore this in the past couple of years. So thank you everyone in the chat for being so active and for the discussion, the conversation. Thanks everyone here for being here, and we'll if you have any links to share, you can you can send them to us and we'll post them on Twitter if there's anything you want people to know about. So yeah, I think I have to ask Sage to
stream?
yeah,
Oh yeah,
just
Sage, she's still
there-
with us. Hi,
she is the
Sage.
actual god of this event, like
Our
behind the
DX
scenes, working
machina.
everything. Yeah.
Yes. Just before I end it, I'll thank you guys all again so much for being here, for closing out our last live event of our Halloween Bash. I dropped some Halloween Bash links in the chat, so please check that out. As Alex said, we'll be sharing any links on Twitter and our other social medias. This recording will be on our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, so if you had to leave early or came in late, getting sang away by a cat, it's perfect. My cat is sleeping in the sun instead of providing entertainment, so but yeah, I think that's about it. We do have Archaeogaming streams at 2 p.m. Eastern time, but of course the US has our time change Sunday, so that'll be like a whole thing. We'll make sure to get lots of tweets right before so you don't miss any. Those happen weekly on Fridays. They're up on our website if you want to RSVP, just to get like an email reminder, but they are live streams, so no pressure
And
there.
our next game is Age of Mythology, quite aptly.
Yeah, it's a perfect lead-in. It's all coming together, our master
Exactly.
plan. All right, and with that, I will